A single moment, one traffic stop, one reach for your legally owned firearm, and everything you thought you knew about your rights just evaporated. May 15th, 2025. The United States Supreme Court handed down a decision so rare, so earth-shattering, that it united every single justice on the bench. 9-0. Conservative, liberal, originalist, progressive. Not a single dissent. When was the last time that happened on a case involving guns and police force? Over a decade ago, and that ruling changed everything. If you carry concealed, if you own a firearm for protection, if you've ever wondered what happens when a cop discovers you're armed during a traffic stop, you need to hear this right now. Because the rules just changed. And the mainstream media? They buried it. This isn't about politics. This is about survival. This is about the legal standard that decides whether an officer who shoots you faces justice or walks free with qualified immunity. For years, entire regions of this country operated under a rule so dangerous, so one-sided, that it essentially made you guilty the moment you touched your gun, even if it was legal, even if you were complying, even if the officer created the danger himself. The case is Barnes versus Felix. And what happened on a highway in Houston in 2016 should terrify every armed American. Picture this: a routine toll violation, flashing lights. An officer approaches your window. You tell him you're legally armed. Everything seems fine, until it isn't. The officer opens your door without warning, draws his weapon. You panic, you drive away, and then, in a decision that defies all logic, the officer jumps onto your moving car. Your car, that he made move, and when you don't stop instantly, he fires. You're hit. You crash. You survive. Barely. Now, here's the nightmare. Under the old rule, the one that just got obliterated, courts weren't allowed to ask why the officer jumped on your car. They couldn't question whether his commands made sense. They couldn't consider that you were legally armed. All they could examine was the single frozen moment before the trigger was pulled. The moment of threat. One snapshot. 1 second. Your life reduced to a frame. That standard just died. Unanimously. But here's what nobody's telling you. The implications don't stop at police shootings. This decision cracks open the door to how the Second Amendment and the Fourth Amendment collide in real time. And if you think this doesn't apply to you, wait until you hear what officers were trained to do the moment they learned you had a gun. Over 20 million concealed carry permit holders in America. Millions more in constitutional carry states. Every single one of you just got a new shield. But only if you understand what this ruling actually means. What happened next in that Houston case will make your blood run cold. Ashen Barnes didn't wake up that morning thinking he'd become the center of a Supreme Court case that would rewrite the rules for every gun owner in America. He was just driving a rental car, his girlfriend's name on the paperwork. Unpaid tolls flagged in the system. Constable Roberto Felix pulled him over. Routine. Happens 50,000 times a day across this country. License and insurance. Barnes didn't have his physical license. Not illegal, just inconvenient. He explained. Felix seemed calm. Then Felix asked him to pop the trunk. Barnes complied, turned the ignition back on to release the latch. Standard. Then everything shattered. Felix opened the driver's door. Gun drawn. No warning. No explanation. Barnes, startled, afraid, confused, did what thousands of people do in that split second of terror. He drove. He tried to leave. And Felix made a choice that no training manual recommends. He jumped onto the side of the moving vehicle, onto the doorsill, clinging to a car that was now accelerating because he'd made it accelerate. Think about that. The officer created the exact danger he would later claim justified the shooting. Felix fired. Barnes was hit. The car crashed. Felix claimed Barnes had tried to run him over, that he feared for his life, that the shooting was justified under the moment of threat doctrine. And here's the horror. 4 federal circuit courts agreed with him. They said the only thing that mattered was whether Felix reasonably feared for his life in that final instant. Everything before it? Irrelevant, inadmissible, erased. It didn't matter that Felix opened the door without warning. It didn't matter that Barnes was not a violent criminal. It didn't matter that Felix voluntarily placed himself in danger by jumping onto a moving vehicle. All that mattered was the frozen moment before the bullet left the chamber. Barnes sued. He argued his Fourth Amendment rights were violated, that the shooting was unreasonable seizure, that any jury looking at the full picture would see this was excessive force. And court after court, using the moment of threat rule, dismissed his case before it even reached a jury. Until May 2025, until 9 justices looked at the same set of facts and said enough. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote the opinion. She didn't mince words. The Fourth Amendment requires courts to examine the totality of the circumstances, not a snapshot, not a single moment, everything. The commands, the tactics, the decisions that led to the trigger pull. You can't judge reasonableness by erasing the context. You can't give officers a pass for creating the very danger they claim justified lethal force. And here's the bombshell. This applies to every police shooting involving a legally armed civilian. If an officer escalates, if an officer gives contradictory commands, if an officer creates confusion or panic and you react by reaching for your legal firearm, courts can no longer ignore how that situation was created. The whole encounter is now fair game. And that changes everything. But this isn't just about one case. This is about the chilling effect that's been suppressing your rights for years. Officers in certain states were trained, either formally or informally, that the moment of threat rule had their back. Shoot first. Explain later. Let the courts erase everything but the final second. Now that shield is gone. And the accountability? It's coming. Your rights as a gun owner just got stronger. But only if you know how to navigate what comes next. Because the fight isn't over. Not even close.